Here we go. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Wiki O'Brien. I'm a Senior Disaster Program Manager for Greater New York. And this is another edition of our We Were There series. So We Were There, our objective is really to look a little back into our past, look at our history to help us learn a little bit where we're going in the future on those lessons and great practices, right? From experts on the panel. So tonight we have a panel of folks who are going to help us focus on mass casualty. Mass casualty responses are very important for us to keep in mind. The one we're focusing on tonight is 9/11. So our experts will speak with you shortly. We will have Doran guiding the story, along with Dario, our regional director, who will help us as the host. And the panel you'll meet very shortly. Before we get started, we do want to ask that we all take an intentional moment of silence to recognize and remember those we lost in mass casualty and 9/11. Join me now in that. Thank you. All right. Let's hear from our panel and our speakers tonight, starting with Darren. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Dario Diaz. I'm the Regional Disaster Officer here for the American Red Cross in Greater New York. I just want to quickly acknowledge some members that we have from the Fire Department of New York City, the DART members, amazing friends of ours who are here with us. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for all the work that you've done for the city of New York. So thank you. So it's really one of those times where I think, sometimes we think about events like these and think of all the sad things about it. But I think it's also important to recognize the amazing work that some individuals put into, along with the fire department and the police department and others. And that's what we're here to do. We'll talk about a little bit about We Were There. Right? So I'm going to ask this amazing panel to introduce yourselves. And I want you to tell me a little bit about your time with the Red Cross, right? So, and we want to also highlight that we have members from the Tzu Chi Foundation. These are good, amazing partners, amazing friends of ours that we work together for years. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the virtual piece, and I'm going to ask VA to start us off.
Thanks, Dario, and thanks for asking me to do this. I appreciate it. So I started in 1991 when I was in Atlanta. I graduated from Georgia State. And I had met Martha Bernstein, who was the director of volunteer resources. I saw those looks, Mike and Sally. You remember her. We didn't have email at that time. So I actually mailed her a letter and put my resume in there, and they hired me. God, who knows what they were thinking. So I started in volunteer resources, and then started working in disaster from that perspective. And what I learned pretty quickly is that I was organized. And so they liked me. So they had me do staffing. So I did staffing for a long time. And then I switched to the dark side. I do have a dog. I've been sitting in this chair all day. And she's like, what's up with that? I started working in disaster in 1996. And then when 9/11 happened, I was the senior director of emergency services, which is Dario's position. I had the comm center, service to armed forces, which at that time was called AFES, Armed Forces Emergency Services, and disaster under me. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Virginia. Louis.
Hi, everybody. And again, echoing what Virginia said, so happy to see some of you and see the three of you that I know here. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch in the screen that I can see and that I can't see, and saying hello to everybody. So my start with Red Cross was volunteering at the Queens chapter when it was there. I don't even know if it's there anymore, quite frankly. And started volunteering with there, a whole bunch of folks, and we started, getting busy and doing some amazing responses there, and I got hooked. And from there, I interviewed with Virginia and started working as a per diem responder, and then a shift manager, supervisor, and kept growing from there. During 9/11, I was the evening shift supervisor, but I happened to have Diego's vehicle, who was Virginia's deputy at the time, because he had to travel out of the country. So I took him to the airport. I kept the car, and that's the reason I ended up being there so quickly and being there even with Virginia. After that, I went over a few years later. I was the chief response officer at that point, that they called it, for the South Florida region. And then I came back to New York, and I had Dario's position previous to you, right, Dario?
No, I was here.
No, I know you were there, but I.
Oh. Thank you, Louis. Sally.
Okay. I first became involved in the Red Cross after watching the news coverage of Flight 800. Every story I watched, the Red Cross was involved. And I was like, ooh, I want to do that. I signed on. I met Virginia, who asked me to restart a Monday night DAT team. And actually, one of the earlier responses I went to a fire was with Louis. He was supposed to train me, and he conducted the entire interview in Spanish. I don't speak.
You learned how to speak Spanish then.
I was one of the first volunteers here on 9/11, and I was very fortunate at the time. So many people wanted to help and respond and weren't in the system, and I was involved in everything from day one all the way through all the memorials. I served as a honor guard. I was a name reader. I was a job director for the memorial. And it was all an incredible experience.
Thank you, Sally. Mike.
Okay, I'm the old guy in the room. This is my 44th year with Red Cross as a volunteer. This means I'm old. Anyway, so I started out as a Red Cross instructor out of the Montclair chapter in New Jersey, transferred to New York a few years later. And I think it was John McGee who suggested, because I have involvement with the police department and fire department, literally every agency in New York, to become what was then called a GLOW, a government liaison officer. We're now liaisons to government, LGs. It's a life of acronyms. I think when VA and all of us and Louis went through the timeline after, a couple of weeks after 9/11, turned out that I was the first Red Cross person on the scene down at Ground Zero, because I was only a few blocks away when the first plane hit, and I self-deployed to Ground Zero, and that turned out to be one of the most eventful days of my life. But we'll go into that as we get to the question stuff.
Thank you, Mike. Eric. Oh, yeah, one there.
Good evening, everybody. San Chiang and I both from Tzu Chi Foundation. Tzu Chi actually is our Chinese name, and that Tzu means compassion, Chi means relief or assistance. So it was founded in 1966 by a Buddhist monk. And actually, back to then, I mean, it was like a grassroots group, with very simple ideas. And has like 30 housewives. You know, they save a very small amount of money every day when they go grocery shopping, and put it away, you know, and put the money together. They'll be able to help people. I mean, you know, with very simple ideas. But and then later, after years, it started to grow and expand to worldwide. Actually, Cesar and I, we are marriage couple, and we are partners in volunteering. And at home, I'm the head of the household, and at the voluntary, and actually she's my boss. I report to her. So being a volunteer for almost 3 decades, and September 11, And actually, it's like nothing else, but it's really, etched in our memory and heart forever. And it's a great honor. I mean, after we served at a Pier 94, we received appreciation from the Red Cross. I still keep it. And how many years? 23, right? Yes. 23 years. We still keep that. Yeah, we really appreciate that. So before we both retired. Before we retired, and I'm a IT specialist. By using our times of the work, we'll be able to help in the communities, and we're still working on. Of course, what we are doing now is quite different from what we have done at 9/11. After 9/11, we do food pantry, hot meal programs like that in the communities, and we're still working on that. I mean, it helps us to grow. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sen, which is like a Tzu Chi. It's a Chinese name. Sen, it's a Chinese name. What's that meaning? It's my birthday is March 3. So March in Chinese pronounced is a 3. It's a San is my birthday. So we had the same last name, Chang. I have been married 40 years. So both of them become volunteer in Tzu Chi more than 30 years. So we have 4 missions. The first mission is a charity. So things in 2015, I'm in charge of the charity development, team leaders. I tried my best to, in our Chinese community, which is in Queens, our Eastern regions, which is cover Boston, Massachusetts, and Chinatown, Manhattan, also Queens, Flushing, Long Island. There's a whole area. This is all the charity which I'm in charge. During the pandemic, I developed a lot, which is a community service. We have all our charity office. We have the family center. So no matter in Long Island, in Manhattan, in Flushing, in Boston, we have the family centers. And so during which is the September 11, that times, I was nurse in the hospital. So that times I have the surgery. That time we stopped the surgery. Our surgeon immediately decided to stop the surgery, save the blood. So we wait for the injury case come to our hospital. But we stopped the surgery for more than a week. And after that, no injury case come into our hospital. So that times I cannot wait. I have to do something to do something to help our charities. So that third days, that times we are going to the ground zero. Okay, we both are going to the ground zero. So then later, we let Eric to describe how we're doing that time.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we have an amazing group of people here who have been serving the community here in New York. And many of them, not only in New York, but gone out to different areas of the country and supported. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Doran to come up a little bit and tell us, we're going to talk a little bit about the event and get an overview. I know that it's in our minds, but let's get a little overview on that. Doran.
Thank you, Dario, and thank you all for being here. As Dario mentioned, we're all familiar with the event, but just to set the stage, at 8:46 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, hijacked American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center complex in Lower Manhattan. This was originally thought to be just potentially a horrific accident until United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower at 9:03. This was followed shortly thereafter by a report that the Pentagon had been struck at 9:37, as well as a DC-bound United Airlines Flight 93 into a field in Pennsylvania. By 10:28, just 102 minutes after the beginning of the attack, both World Trade Center towers had completely collapsed. 2,977 souls perished in the attacks, including 343 New York City firefighters, 23 New York City police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers. Immediately after the North Tower was struck, the American Red Cross of Greater New York began to mobilize. And now we'll hear from our responders.
Thank you, Doran. So we'll talk a little bit about the initial response at this point. And I'm going to ask you a few questions that I'm going to ask you to share with us your experience that day. Right. First question I have for you is how and where were you mobilized, right? So how do you get mobilized to operate this response? Sansan, if we can start with you.
我来讲。
Yeah, you can say it together.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, we are not as lucky as Saudi. We, like millions of Americans, want to be a volunteer. We want to be able to help, to offer help, but we find no way because it is such huge catastrophe. New York City denies all the volunteer requests, except for the construction workers and the medical professionals. So we want to help, but we didn't know where to go. Finally, go through one of the volunteer. She is a doctor. She be able to get a permit from Salvation Army. So within the vehicle permit she got from us, we're able to go into the ground zero. Remember back to then, the whole area below 14th Street, they all dark and blocked it. So nobody had access to it, I mean, for ordinary people.
And I was sitting there waiting to see the doctor, and the window faced the World Trade Center, and I saw the first plane hit. So at that time, I had a position with NYPD. I had license siren on my car, and I left the office, went down. I said, I was actually heading towards 7 World Trade, where at that time was the command center for OEM. And I got my car down there. They wouldn't let me in the zone, so leave the car outside, which turned out to be a blessing. But I ended up going to 7 World Trade, and they were evacuating 7 World Trade. Ended up with a command post on Church Street was being created. I know that Virginia and Louis, I think, ended up on the west side of the site. I ended up on the east side, and started to work at that command post. We had very quickly, we had NYPD, we had fire, we had EMS, which at that time separate from fire, and that's where we were, and that's where we were positioned. And I just started responding to requests from NYPD and from fire. And at that time, I had no communication because I could not communicate with Virginia or Louis or anybody because the cell system went down. So I just was trying to take care of whatever I could take care of and coordinate stuff. At that time, Chief Ali had said to me, never forget this one, he said, which hat are you wearing? I said, which hat, what do you need? And we went back and forth on that about 5 times. And I said, what do you want? He said, I think we need a temporary morgue. I said, okay. So I was about to leave to go up Church Street to one of the churches to see about setting up a temporary morgue. At that time, we thought we needed one. We learned later we did not. But as I'm walking away from the command group, that's when the South Tower came down. And everyone I had been standing with got killed. And it was a matter of maybe 10 or 11 seconds that made a difference for me sitting here today.
Thank you, Mike. Sally?
I was in my office and one of my colleagues came in and said that a plane had hit the World Trade Towers. And we went down into the street, the lobby of our building, there was a bank and they had cameras, television sets. And we watched the second plane hit, and I turned to her and I said, I'll see you later. And I went upstairs, got my belongings and went to the Red Cross and basically didn't leave for days. It was chaotic in that within moments, there were hundreds of people in the lobby of the old building wanting to do something. And, nothing was set up at this point. At one point, I was asked to separate doctors and nurses and put them in one of our conference rooms on another floor, which I did. And About an hour later, somebody came to me and said, they're revolting. They've got to do something. They can't be stuck in that room. So I think it was Virginia asked me to drive them down to the Chelsea Piers, which was set up as a site to bring bodies and victims. And I went there, dropped them off, and they got out of the car, and this man jumped in the car. Two men jumped in the car and said, "We're doctors. There's nobody here. You have to take us down to St. Vincent's now." So I did, dropped them off, went back up to the chapter, was sent down a bit later down to Ground Zero to look for some volunteers that had gotten lost and had no way to get back. And it's indescribable. I mean, everything was covered in that dust. The Klieg lights that were on at the site had this sort of filtered light because of all the dust that was still going on. There was more paper than I've ever seen in my life everywhere, and it was dead quiet. And I rounded up the volunteers, and on the way out, I saw a couple of firemen that were working, and I said, "Where are you going?" And they said, "We're walking." I said, "Where are you going?" And they said, "We're going back to our house." I said, "Where is it?" It was up here, or no, 68.
66, yeah.
Yeah.
68, yeah.
Forgot where I am for a moment. So I drove them back. One of them said that he had actually worked on construction in the World Trade Center, and he took his team to a certain door that he knew was a place that people could escape. And he said it was floor to ceiling rocks. He said, "There's nobody alive in there." And their pain was palpable. I drove all over the city, dropping them off, dropping off the various volunteers during that time. I never stopped at a single red light. There was not a car on the road. Nobody was even parked on the road. It was the most extraordinary thing. But yes, that was my first day.
Thank you, Sally. Louis.
Virginia, do you mind starting? I think you're tying first, and I can fill in the blanks because I'm pretty much followed what we did together, basically.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm always amazed, and I will tell you that from a personal perspective, one of the things that fascinates me to this day is hearing other people's story about 9/11. Because first of all, I still don't remember stuff. I have a Stenopad that everything's written down in what I did, but there's still not a memory of it. It's not there. So, Diego and I were at a state meeting in Albany, and Diego's father-in-law had died. So we both came back on that Monday, on September 10th. I was supposed to be gone all week. Diego was supposed to be gone all week. So we came back, and I came in early the next morning. I remember I talked to Calvin Drayton on my way in because he'd been out and we were catching up. And I was at 150 in my office, and Sherry Capers called me because she had seen Michael Jackson the night before, and she called to tell me about that concert and to tell me that she had jury duty. And so we talked, and then I called Mama's. So all you 150 people will get that. Ordered coffee, was about to walk out of my office to go get coffee, and my phone rang, and it was Sherry again. I was like, "What?" And she's like, "VA, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center." I said, "No, it didn't." She's like, "Yeah, it did." So I went to the comm center, and there was TVs in there for those of you that had never been to 150. And on every TV was a hole in the World Trade Center. And I, like everyone else, thought that a Cessna had hit. Why would I think anything else? And so Rosemary Falls Burns now was in there. She had a purple suit on. And Rosemary, I said to she said, "What do you want me to do?" Because Bob Bender was at the dentist, and I reported to Bob at the time. And Rosemary, I said, very calmly, in my recollection, "Don't send anyone else down. We need to assess the situation before we know if it's safe or not." well, come to learn out, I was screaming at Rosemary because I was not as calm as I thought I was. So at that point, Max came in, Max Green, and he was the AD of Ops. And Max and I got in his car and we drove down there. We piggybacked on an MTA vehicle. We were on the West Side Highway, but you couldn't see the World Trade Center yet. So we're probably on 11th Avenue when the second plane hit. So when we got down there, we didn't know that a second plane had hit. And, you know, a couple of things for a couple other questions in that section, Dario, is I didn't think it was terror related. I mean, for the first 45 minutes, I just thought that a Cessna had hit the World Trade Center. But Max and I got down there, we got out of the car, and I had a white jacket I think the team had given me that had a Red Cross on the back. And so I had put that on, and Max starts running because you know Max, he's going to run down there. And I said, Max, don't run. We have a long day ahead of us. And who knew? I had no idea what we were dealing with. And we found Calvin Drayton in the garage of the World Financial Center. Because one of the things I always did on jobs is I was the lead for Red Cross there, and I would go find the lead from OEM, which was typically Calvin Drayton, who was the first deputy. And I walked up and put my hand on his back, and he said, hold on. And he turned around and he's like, we need to sweep the garage. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? A plane just hit the World Trade Center and you're interested in sweeping the garage? And then everything clicked for me. He wasn't sweeping the garage. He was sweeping for bombs. And there was chatter on the radio about a flight over Chicago. And so I had gone up and called Bob Bender, and because I finally was able to get to him at the shoe store in the World Financial Center. And Bob said, you know, I love Bob Bender. He taught me service delivery. He talked sometimes like Snuffleupagus. And he said, well, Virginia, I got to tell you, there's been another attack at the Pentagon. And at that point, I didn't know a second plane had hit. And so he told me that. So that kind of shifted things for me. And, you know, I was concerned. It was noisy. It was, you know, probably for me, one of the most difficult things. We all saw a lot that day. But for me, there was a couple. The guy had on a blue tie. I can remember that to this day, that jumped out of one of the stories very, very high. And they held hands, he and the woman. And that really had an impact on me, because the thought that you were going to jump from an 100-story building, why would you do that? And finally, what I came to terms with for me, so I could understand it, was they made a choice. They made a choice that they were either going to burn to death or they were going to jump. You know, people say to me, what was it like? And what it was like, it was noisy. And I'm amazed that there weren't more people killed on the sidewalks with the bodies that were jumping, the jumpers. And that was pretty difficult to me, for me. It still is, obviously. But, you know, I think it's just the fact that my point of reference on this had been the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. That was the first day I ever met Calvin Drayton. And he and I drove down there together, and we worked all weekend. And in that, we set up a family respite center, for lack of a better word, in the World Financial Center. And so that was my plan that day. We were going to set up that in the front lobby of the World Financial Center. Never even occurred to me that it was all glass. And then Rebecca Hansen, Annie Grunwald, all the people that worked at New York City OEM, Cesar Rivera, was like a brother to me. Calvin, where were they? Were they okay? Mike Emmerman. And I knew that there would be people impacted by this, our people. And one of the things that I am most proud about, and I say this when people say, what's your best thing that's ever happened to you in a job interview, is the fact that we didn't lose anyone that day. The only other person that went down there from 150 was K-Mine Theogene, and he drove a nerve down there. And he ended up on the east side of the tower in a subway and with an EMT guy, and they pulled metal down. That's how they were able to survive it. But when he came back to 150, he was white and he's African, because he was covered in dust. And so the kind of snippets in my memory on that are things like that. And, you know, you look at what did we put people through that day. So it was, yeah. And then when we arrived, Dario, back at 150, it was about 10:50 a.m. And Bob came up to me. There were people everywhere. I mean, the lobby, Sally, you said this, the lobby was packed. There were people everywhere. And Catherine Theodore and Bob Bender were standing with Jerry at the front desk. And I was a little shaken because, you know, Michael, like you, by the grace of God, we sit here today, because we were standing right across from the World Financial Center when the towers came down, and we ran. And Bob put his arm around me and tapped his watch, and he said, "You have 10 minutes to get ready, and then you have to lead your team." So what saved me that day was the mission of the Red Cross and the fact that I didn't have time to really think about what had just happened. But Dario, you know, like you do every day, like Louis done in his role there, like I did, we had work to do. And so it was people like Sally and like Mike that really made that possible. So Louis, to you.
Thank you, VA.
Can I just add one thing to that? Virginia and Max also returned completely white, covered in dust. They've forgotten that, but.
Yeah, but Sally,
Yeah,
I will tell you, like 3 days later, I remember washing my hair and I'm like, what is that? And I mean, I had glass in my hair, and it was, you know, there was no concept of this. So there was no way to understand what we'd been through. Louis.
Yeah, so I had hair back then, and I actually, that's the same thing happened as well. I had glass in my hair, and I cut the tips of my fingers. But I think, so going back to my beginning, or my day, if you will, as VA mentioned, I had, you know, Diego had gone to take care of his family and he was on a plane actually. And I had the car. I happened to have the car, and I was moonlighting, if you will, in the morning. So I had the night shift. I was doing some electrical work in a building where Long Island City is. And of course I had the BNN, I had the pagers, I had all the pagers that we used to use back in the day to get information. And they started going off like crazy. And that's when I realized, yes, the first reports were Cessna. And okay, I knew immediately that I needed to leave. I started communicating, you know, I basically knew that I needed to go. I didn't necessarily self-deploy. I think at some point, Virginia, you texted me or you called me or whatever we used at that time to kind of just, hey, if you can get down here, get down here. And I piggybacked behind a fire department truck, and then a rescue truck. And I was there from Long Island City and Midtown Tunnel to World Trade in 12 minutes after the second plane hit, because I saw the second plane hit the building as I was getting out and going into the tunnel. So we met up, and kind of like what happened with Mike, I was going to 7th World Trade. I was going to 7th World Trade. That was kind of where I was going. And I remembered Virginia's conversations, because I asked her, where do we set up if something happens? And we talked about 93 at several conversations. I remember setting up on the corner, and we went there. And that's initially I went to 7th World Trade, so that there was a lot of debris in the middle of the street. And I kept hearing the dump trucks. For me, the story is the dump trucks. I was shocked. You know, I was always impressed at how OEM in the New York City, you know, kind of responded very quickly and started getting everything fixed up, right? So for me, the thing was, wow, these dump trucks got here really quick, and they're cleaning up and they're getting ready to clean up. This is something that's gonna be resolved right away. Walk across the street to meet Virginia and Max, and I see a TV camera that I had never seen before. It was sitting on the floor, right? And the lens is 90 degrees looking up at the buildings. Then that's when I looked up and I saw, you know, the same thing that Virginia mentioned. I saw the people jumping. And now all those dump trucks were not the dump trucks, were actually the people that were the impact and the sounds, and they were loud. You know, loud is a good word to say. And then after that, we pretty much connected. Virginia, Max, and I were all kind of together. We stuck together. And by the grace of God, quite frankly, we got out of those buildings. I still don't know how. Virginia's phone got lost in the way, and she wanted me to get no. There was a phone that got lost. Virginia's phone got lost, and I was trying to go get it. I remember the panic in that of just turning around. I just turned around like 3 feet, and it seemed like it was a lot longer. But we lost phones. We lost we lost significant communication, but we had enough to be able to get back to headquarters that we didn't want anybody deploying. And I remember Harry Avila getting fired 3 times by Bob because he said not to send any of the equipment, any of the herbs to go down. So, you know, I try to put a little levity in this because it's a very difficult subject, but I will tell you that all of us that you see here that responded have struggled by that experience. And that's one of the things that at least I want to kind of convey to all of you, that it was tough. It was an ugly day and it was an ugly time. But because of the love and the respect and the experiences that we all had together, we got through it. And you've got to lean on each other because there was some really, really bad days, really bad days, really bad hours. And, you know, we're all alive to tell you that because of what we've gone through. So we'll get into some of that more, but I don't want to take up any more time.
Yeah, Dario, the one thing I'd add to that is probably in 98, 99, we got Nextels. And we thought we were the coolest people ever. And Nextels were a phone and point to point. And so you could go point to point with someone. And when Max, Louie, and I had made it back to West Side and Chambers Street, I needed to phone home. I needed to let Bob know we were okay. And Harry was working the Nextel for Bob. And, you know, I remember the last thing Bob said to me is, don't put yourself in harm's way. And I was like, man, I wish I'd thought about that earlier. But you think about the communication pieces that we have, and that was the only way we could communicate, was through that Nextel, that point to point. It was the only thing that worked. So I think looking at what are your different options for how you communicate is super important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mike.
Virginia, I don't know if you must remember this, but later that afternoon, early evening, can't remember anymore, we both ended up at the police academy because there was no other place to create a command center. And I remember going into the small room of, I think it was on the 2nd or 3rd floor, can't remember, where Virginia and I had one phone line and tried to operate the whole system out of that. If you remember what a command center looked like, this was not it. And there was another room, I think it was on the 1st floor, where they had long tables and they were trying to get people in there to respond. And Virginia and I were in this other room upstairs, and we finally had a brilliant idea, which was, let's get a ham operator in. And it took a couple of hours, but we ended up, somebody showed up, I can't remember who it was, climbed onto the roof, put up an antenna, ran the antenna down to the room that we were in. And I think we were there until something like 2 a.m, trying to coordinate stuff, but there was no communication.
Yeah. And Dario, what I would say is, you know, I would not lose this opportunity. You talk about multi-hazard approach. We had to open shelters. And we opened the hurricane shelters. People thought I was crazy. Our team thought I was lost my mind. But I was like, we know these shelters. We're not having school tomorrow. We have everything we need on them. That's the place to go. And so, you know, when you think about it, some of the things that we plan for, it may not happen the way we think it's going to happen, but we are going to figure it out and get it done.
Thank you, Virginia. And I think that's a reality, right? That we have to be ready and having this whole hazard approach is the way to go. So thank you. Let me ask you all a question, and just, you know, if you could just tell me yes or no. Virginia said she did not think at the beginning it was a terrorist attack. Did any of you think it was a terrorist attack?
Only after the second plane hit.
Only after the second plane.
Second
No.
plane.
Second plane. Yeah.
See, I didn't know a second plane had hit.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, you know, how we, the perception at the moment, and, you know, as I said before, we have members of FDNY, which again, that's another totally different perception that they can tell you about. But we definitely should do something together with them.
Dario, one thing I'll add to that, just to what VA said, is there was no, we didn't have the perspective that everybody had on TV either. We didn't I mean, at least I didn't realize how big the hole was, how much damage had been caused by these buildings either. So it was, I mean, for a time there, it seemed like it was something terrorism related, but we didn't realize how, at least I didn't realize how big it was. So.
Thank you, Louis. I'm gonna invite Doran to come up real quick and give us another.
So Dario mentioned the FDNY. One of the important partner organizations that we still currently use is the organization DART, which is the Disaster Assistance Response Team. So DART is a nonprofit group that was established in 1989 and is dedicated to helping families affected by both natural and man-made disasters. They're highly trained active duty and retired firefighters, excuse me, receive Red Cross disaster response training in a wide variety of functions, including but not limited to sheltering, feeding, logistics, and government liaison roles. DART members have deployed both locally and nationally to some of the largest events in recent history, including Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, and the Oklahoma City bombing, just to name a few. During the 6 months following the September 11th attacks, DART members alternated between conducting search and rescue efforts with their respective fire companies and assisting families at the Red Cross Family Assistance Center at Pier 94. Should also be noted that 5 of the 343 New York City firefighters that perished in 9/11 were DART members. One of DART's current active members is retired firefighter Patrick Clancy of Ladder 164 in Brooklyn. Immediately following the attacks, like many, Pat responded to Ground Zero with his fire company. In the following video, Pat will recall being assisted by the American Red Cross. And we'll get that up in just a second.
So we searched for a few hours, and we were kind of getting covered in this white. I would climb white powder. I would climb 20, 30 feet in the air with one firefighter watching me, and we both look in some voids and yelling out. There was a group in these vests that I saw had Red Cross on them. So had been asked, are you okay? Do you need any, your eyes washed? Eventually there was a tent set up, a very small tent right around that area. And they had people flushing your eyes out if you needed, and maybe some granola bars and some water, things like that. So I always remember that lady was a woman, flushing out mine and the firefighters that were with me.
Throughout our conversation, Pat will go on to tell me that a lot of the experiences he had during 9/11 encouraged him to join DART, along with several members that he knew that were already a part of DART. He joined several years later and currently lives in Tennessee and continues to deploy with them on local and national operations. And I'll turn it back over to Dario, and we'll speak about the days after the initial attack.
Thank you, Doran. And as I mentioned before, we have 3 DART members here, actually some of the leadership of DART that have been in front and center of the support, who also served in the fire department. So thank you again. I'm gonna go ahead and move on a little bit. And again, I think we can talk about each day for hours and days, right? So we're gonna move it along a little bit, but I tell you the truth, even I wanna hear more about some of the things that were talked about. But moving it along a little bit, let's talk about from about September 13th on to about March of the next year. Sally, I have a question for you. How do you continue to support the disaster relief operation in that time?
I was very fortunate with my company gave it to me as military leave. So I could sort of with a clear conscience spend all my time with Red Cross, and I would go into work in the evenings a couple of times.
Thank you, Sally. Louis, can I ask you a question? Can you tell me a little bit about how new volunteers were integrating during this time? We heard that there was a lot of people, and you heard people trying to donate blood, I'm sure, right, at that time. I'm not sure. I know about that. I'm acting like I didn't know. But Louis, can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
So there was three elements, I think. There was a volunteer element, the financial element, and the blood element, right? And I think the volunteers just showed up. People just showed up and wanted to do something. And the volunteer team, that was there, they just took information, and we tried to vet the people as much as possible. We were very deliberate, I think, and VA, stop me in this part if I'm wrong. We were very deliberate in making sure that we did not have any new volunteers, because there was a lot of looky-loos, if you will, that wanted to go into the hot zone, if you will, or ground zero area to do some of this. So we're very conscious of that. We had the respite center that was open. We need a lot of folks there. There were incidents that occurred there that we had to watch over. So that was one of the things that the best thing is to vet people before, ideally. You may not use them all the time, but it's good to have them. And it's just tough because the volume that came in. I mean, we had the stories where we had folks that came in with money, for example, literally cash, and dumped it in the front door. Blood, everybody wanted to come to the building because, again, they all related the blood to the blood services that we had underneath in the building. That was New York Blood Services. So it was just overwhelming at every aspect. So I think it's something to keep in mind, that what's the volunteer plan, what's the strategy on that, and multiply it exponentially in any event that you're going to do.
Thank you, Louis.
I'd like to add to that. By that afternoon, people, and Sally, I know you remember this, by that afternoon, people were lined up around the block for us. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, wow, I didn't realize we were so important. PD has blocked off 66th Street. Well, we had a Con Ed plant behind us, so it wasn't about us, but of course it had to be. But what we ended up doing is opening Martin Luther King High School up, their auditorium. And John McGee taught thousands of people orientation, thousands of people. And it would be 200, 300 people at a time. I talked to someone who joined that, was in there, she's a therapist, and most people came to that because they did not want to go home to an empty apartment. They wanted to get that community feeling. It was a terrifying time. And so one of the things that we did that we didn't even know we were doing was we were offering an opportunity for that community to come together. And it was coming together to listen to what the Red Cross was doing. Many of those people did volunteer, but it was an opportunity. And so I think in many ways, we had our own community respite center at Martin Luther King High School, because we had mental health people there. We had John McGee there, and we were talking about what people needed to do. So when you look back, that in itself wasn't a sexy assignment, but it was so critical for the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Virginia. Virginia, I'm going to come back to you real quick. And one of the advantages that we have at the American Red Cross is that we're part of a large movement, right? It's not just the American Red Cross in Greater New York. It's also the American Red Cross. It's also the International Federation of Red Cross Workers Societies. It's also the ICRC. So we're part of this movement that actually allows us to get that extra support and that extra help that is important. So Virginia, can you tell us a little bit about the integration, transitioning, collaboration with the national organization at that point in this operation?
Sure. I mean, the morning of, I called the doc and told him what was going on. I was still in the comm center at that time. And they sent people up. They sent their comms truck up, had a satellite on top, which was really nice until someone put gas in a diesel engine. So we couldn't use it anymore. But there were a lot of experts that came up, and they were very, very helpful. And I think some of the lessons I learned with that is not only how helpful they were, but how important it is that you have that local knowledge. I had to go over to NYU at, 3:30 in the morning on September 12th to talk about opening a family assistance center. And it was going to be in an auditorium. So it was auditorium seating. And so the president of NYU Hospitals was out of town, but they had the president on the phone. And so I get on the phone with the president, who happens to be Terry Bischoff, who knew that she'd come to the Red Cross at the time. And I had to make a tough decision and say, this is not appropriate. And, you know, I remember some of our colleagues from National were amazed that I would turn that down. I was like, you can't do this here. You know, I think that they moved quickly and they got things going. And they got us the resources that we needed. And they were able to push things through that made it it was super helpful for us. There was a lot of churn at national headquarters. I remember driving up Amsterdam Avenue with Bob, and Bob said to me, we're going to raise $1 billion. And I said, well, that's really good. He's like, it's not good. It's a challenge for us because how are we going to spend the money? And so one of the things at that time, our president was Bernadine Healy, and she made some fund, Patriot Fund, something like that. I don't remember. I've blocked it. And we got hammered in the media. We got killed. There's no other way to put it. Because what people thought was that they were giving money that was going to help people in New York City, people in Washington, D.C., people in Pennsylvania. And then she's got this idea where it's going to be teaching health and safety courses. And that's not what they wanted to do. And we really, you know, there was organizational risk, unbelievable organizational risk with that. Bob Bender, one of the things about him is he really protected us from some of that churn at the national level. And his thing to us was always focus on what you're doing. And, you know, Bob Bender had always been Mr. Bender to me. I mean, I'd worked for Bob since I started there. I was 25 years old. You can do the math and figure out how old I am now. I'm 58. I'll save you the problem. But you know, Bob and I, it got to the point where we were a team. We rode all over together and we really worked through things. And, you know, I remember then it became the craze that you need to get a mask. And if you're going to get a mask, you have to be fitted. So Bob and I went and stood in line together so we could both be fitted in a mask. And every time I saw it, do you have your mask? I'm like, yeah, I have my mask. But, you know, Dario, to your point, there was a lot of churn at the national level. You know, it makes me think a little bit about some of the major disasters we've had, Sandy, Katrina, you know, all the ones, there's always churn at the national level. It didn't matter to us because we had a mission. And, you know, I come back to that all the time. We set up respite centers. There's one on the north side of the pile, one on the south side of the pile. We fed people. We spent millions of dollars on food, millions of dollars on food. But for the firefighters and for the emergency service workers that were down there, they were able to come to the respite center, get food, get a massage, talk to mental health people, get dry socks, you know. And so what we did, I couldn't be more proud of that. And so our job, my job as the lead there, was to keep the churn out of the system, so that people could. It was very demoralizing for a long time there because you're working 18-hour days and you're getting crucified in the media. We got kicked out of Battery City because BMW exec lost a child on one of the flights and they donated 10 BMW SUVs to us. And it had big Red Cross signage all over it. And then in the back quarter panel, it had like a 9-point font donated by BMW. So we had volunteers driving around Battery Park City, giving out mint Milanos that were also donated, bottles of water in a BMW. And we got crucified. And so I think, you know, looking back on that, we made some mistakes, but we learned from it. So that was much more than you asked, but we were, you know, I think part of the reason it was so strong was, you know, Bob Bender was a powerhouse as the CEO in Greater New York. We were the largest chapter in the country. I think in my time there, we probably had 8 DROs because we paid for our own stuff. So it was very rare that we got a DR number from national headquarters. So, you know, it was sometimes, and you know this, Dario, because I've been that person for you, I'm sure. Sometimes help isn't help. And we got to figure that out.
Thank you, Virginia. And I think, but it's important to understand that these lessons learned are also being used today by the organization, right? So it's not a lost thing, right? I think that's important. And we have 7 fundamental principles that connect us, that guide us, right? The principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence, universality, unity, volunteer service. So these things are important to keep in mind. So I think it's okay to talk about these mistakes that were made, as long as we learn from them and we continue to improve our ability. So thank you, VA, for the candid information. To our friends in Tzu Chi, after that, how do you personally, but how also Tzu Chi, continue to support that operation in the next few months?
At the first, Tzu Chi want to help, but never heard of a name Tzu Chi. So we didn't have an invitation to attend a meeting actually organized by FEMA and the Red Cross, because they plan to set up a family center. But you know, after from the conversations with both parties, we finally got a ticket to enter Pier 94, and in New Jersey side, it's at a Liberty Park. We'll be able to have our own booth in the family center at Pier 94 and the Liberty Park. We have a very simple idea what to do, because our founder realized over 2,000 victims represent over 2,000 families. Most of those families, they're gonna face financial difficulties right away. So we plan to issue cash to each one of the family. So the booth at the Pier 94 originally was 10 by 10 in size, and later was expanded to 10 by 20. All the volunteers, we take turns to serve at a booth, go through a very simple verification with the name list provided by FEMA and the Red Cross. Of the simple verification, we issue a check with $1,000 to each one of the family. And later, a lady who received the check made a speech at a hearing at a Congress. She recognized the immediate assistance Tzu Chi provide her, and she really appreciate that. So in total, we provide over $2 million to help those families. And one of the recipients, later on, she mailed back one check with $1,000 to pay back to Tzu Chi. And it makes us feel like you know, it's very warm. So and also we have over hundreds of volunteers take turns to service at a family center. That's how we had a very good interactivities where we cross volunteers at a food service. I don't know if you know that Red Cross run a food service at 24 hours in the family centers. It was, you know, would actually provide a lot of convenience to the families and all the volunteers as well. And I still remember that. And, you know, with wonderful food. I don't know if you remember that. And that's very, very warm, you feel like. And I also remember that the service center closed before Christmas. And we had a big party. A memory and a big party, and you know, there's tons of toys for children, from the families, and they suddenly remember that. Right? That's something, I still remember that. Well, that was very nice. Yeah. Yeah, basically that's what we did. I mean, anything we need to, Sansan, you want to add?
Well, all the disaster happened. Our master, Reng Yanze, taught us, our volunteers, 5 principles you had to do. This first one is right away. So whenever disaster happened, like Cindy, Katrina, all the happened to not only United States, even other countries happened, we do help right away. We go there. We have check to evaluate what kind of help we can do for the victims. So for this kind of 9/11, we know the money is a good issue, cash for help the families. And which I have been Sri Lanka, as the tsunamis happened, we help the victims how to rebuild up their house and also give them mental service. That's very important for us. So, but the tsunamis that happened in Sri Lanka, the people need, which is noodles, flowers, food. So we buy from the local area because we want to develop their environment. So then we buy from them and we give to the residents, which is the victims, the families. So that's where our principle to do. So so in China, we never give the money for that time. So for the government, we had to put our hand direct to give to the victims' families. Now transfer from the government. Okay, in North Korea, we will never do that. We have do our director, all volunteer went there, and we go past our love and respect to them. That's all we do the way. Okay.
Thank you, Sansan.
Yeah, besides the financial assistance, and I believe with the women's parts, we give them hug and pass down what we care to all those families, and we listen to their stories, because each family has their own stories. And one of the lady told us, because she has 2 children, like after the disaster, every time when she heard the train sounds, I mean, she has a hope. I mean, her husband will step out the station. I mean, that lasts for quite a while. Another story is like a mom. I mean, she lost a connection with her son. But later, when she watched the TV news, and she saw her son was helping a lady on the street. So actually, she was. I mean, the son was okay. I mean, that kind of story. We have so many. We heard so many warm stories, and really, I mean, make us like just like all the victim families are very heartbroken. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric Sansan. Eric mentioned before that at the time maybe the Tzu Chi name was not a well-known name, but today I can tell you and assure you that it is. As we work operations, we automatically say, "Hey, did somebody contact the Tzu Chi?" You're definitely a great partner to us and to the community in general.
Dario, just
yes.
real quick, I would not be doing my job if I didn't do this. I guess 2 years ago, I was a job director for the Mayfield tornado. 75 people were killed. Candle factory, I think everyone knows that. It started on December 12th. And it was a small community that was just demolished. And I have to say that one of the bright shining stars in all that was Tzu Chi. And I remember working with them side by side. And what you did, Eric and Sansan, for those residents, for those communities, is you made a difference. And we used to think that the Red Cross was the table, that we are the people at the table. The reality is we are part of a bigger community, and it's folks like you that make a difference. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned, because somebody was talking to me about that today, Katie Walsh, about how, the sushi table is so important in these operations. So thank you. Mike, I'm going to connect something that Eric talked about. Eric talked about that being there, that well-being, that mental health piece. So let me ask you a question, Mike, and I think that's important for all of us to work in this business, in this community. How do you take care of your well-being during that continued response, those the September 13th type of day to about March?
That woman over there, that redhead woman, my wife, I wouldn't have been able to survive that period. I truly wouldn't have come through that period without her. And for everybody in the room, if you're a responder, there is something called special knowledge. All of us who have ever responded to serious issues have special knowledge, and we recognize it in each other. It's things that normal people don't ever see. Because you recognize that, you hang out with other people who have special knowledge, because you don't have to say anything. And I learned through that period. I had been a responder. I actually worked with the NYPD dive team on the TWA operation, Flight 800. That was a very, very tough operation for me. That got followed up by 9/11, which solidified in my mind that all of us have to take care of ourselves. And if we need help, you need to talk to somebody. You need to share it. You can't keep it to yourself. So for me, it was my wife, Pat, and a handful of people that I had encountered through TWA 800 who understood this. So I implore everybody who does this seriously to talk to people.
Thank you, Mike. And I want to plug in right away real quick. Our mental health folks in the Red Cross, we do have them. They are an important part of our operation, and they're there for us, right? To support us, they're there for the clients, but for us as well. And I think that's important to acknowledge. So thank you, Mike, for sharing about that. I'm going to ask Doran to come up again and tell us a little bit about the mass care recollection.
Thanks, Dario. As you've been hearing, the members of the American Red Cross quickly leaped into action following the attacks. The volunteers of the communication center actually answered approximately 43,000 calls over the first 36 hours. During the initial phase of the response, 18 mobile relief units were established to support and feeding operations for thousands of emergency workers. Family Assistance Center quickly opened, along with 13 shelters. Hundreds of mental health and spiritual care workers were recruited to join the Red Cross to assist those in need. The Red Cross teamed up with many small businesses, community partners, and corporations to carry out their mission. An example of this was seen during the third week of the response, when the Red Cross partnered with the ability to log on and register themselves on the Red Cross website so that their loved ones could know that they were safe. Within the first 2 months of the response, the Red Cross registered and deployed 33,000 volunteers to assist in disaster relief operations. Astonishingly, 29,000 were from the greater New York area. While assistance came quickly from all over the country, the members of the greater New York Red Cross continued to be involved in the response. Virginia mentioned Harry Avila. He's currently one of our response managers. During the time of this event, he was a mass care logistics member. Look, if you could just go back. So he provided a quote. He was unable to be here tonight. For 4 weeks that I was involved in 9/11, I was mainly working with mass care and logistics. I remember working long hours. My boss at the time instructed us to never say no when larger companies like Sleepy's were looking to donate. I remember being there as the organization tried to figure out what our role would be in such a devastating disaster. But I also remember how the entire chapter came together and worked together to make sure that we were all providing the correct assistance to our New York City. We worked with a lot of different people. I remember working with 2 movie stars, and they were great. I also worked with Chris from The Sopranos on a nerve, and I tell you, he made me nervous. And he was a great guy. And what I noticed most was that he came every day to help with no camera crews or nothing, just by himself. but everyone who came to help did a great job. They made my job a lot easier, and some came with great ideas on how to oversee all the donations coming in from all types of vendors and how to manage approximately 20 to 30 herbs that responded at that time. Dario?
Thank you, Doran. And that talks about the power of the volunteers, right? How they come out, and in this case it was a star, but in this case that person was just a volunteer, somebody, and not just in a negative sense, just in the sense that they're not trying to get additional glory, right? They're there to help, they're there to support, and that's what's amazing, I think, about this organization. So I had to say that because that's important to me. So we're gonna move on and then talk about a little bit about the years that follow, right? So 9/11 is not just that event that happened in that moment. To a lot of us, to most of us, to I think to our country, to the world, has changed a lot of the way we do things, has changed a lot of the way we see things. So that said, let's talk a little bit about what happened after that. So Virginia, I'm gonna start with you. What did the organization learn because of September 11 attacks? And how did we adapt and how did we change? And what went well? So it's a loaded question for you there.
I'll say. So I mean, I can't help putting some stuff together with this, Dario. So 9/11 happened 2 months and a day. Flight 587 went down in Bell Harbor. He had the anything that was white powder was anthrax. I remember Calvin Drayton called me at 6 a.m. one morning because there was anthrax at our headquarters, which is where New York City OEM's headquarters is right now, on the Brooklyn chapter on Cadman Plaza, and it was sweet and low. So we went through a period of time where everything was a terrorism event. We had a building collapse on the Lower East Side, Chelsea, I don't remember where, it doesn't matter. And it was just a building collapse. But we went through a period of time where everything was a crisis. We talk about the 5 tasks of crisis leadership, and it's, making sense of what's happening, managing your message, giving that message out, lessons learned, and getting back to normal. I'll be quite honest, and I'll say I'm not sure we ever got back to normal. And I think that that's probably, I think that what my analogy, and it's interesting because Diego Pardo was my deputy. He was on a plane that morning. He saw it happen from the runway on JFK. Obviously, he didn't fly out. But Becky McCory told him to go home, and he didn't work for a week. And he was pissed because he wanted help. That's what we all wanted to do. And when he came back, one of the things I said to him is, it's almost like the chapter picked up, moved 2 feet to the right or left, depending on which way you want to go, doesn't matter. And so it was a new world that we were in at that time. We spent a lot of time responding to 9/11 in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2022, 2023. That's one of the things that I think happened. And I think part of that was, you look at how it's happened. 9/11 happened, then we focused solely on terrorism. And we had all kinds of courses that came out and things that we were supposed to do. Katrina happened. Everyone had to redo their hurricane plan. Sandy happened. What happens? We have an urban disaster and, a major urban disaster. How do we manage that? Then we had COVID, and we had Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Laura, and we did NCS. And so we had to learn how to do non-congregate sheltering. Then we had Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Ida. And so the list goes on and on. But I think what I've learned, and one of the things I really work on my team to encourage them to do, is not focus on the disaster, but to focus more on that hazard approach. There are things that, I talk to Becky McCory almost every day, and there are things that she and I both learned during 9/11 that I still put into practice this day. And it's about staff safety. It's about responding to the right disaster. It's about making sure that, we have a plan as to how we're going to move forward. And I think the most important thing is that we're responding to the mission. And so, you know, I learned a lot. From a personal perspective, it was horrible. 2 weeks to the day after 9/11, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and she lived 18 months. You know, you add another 6 weeks after that, we have 587. You know, it took me a long time to kind of get my feet back on the ground because I felt like the ground wasn't there. What do I know about it? What do I know about us? I know about us is that, you know, the Mike Emmermans, the Sally Phipps, Tzu Chi, Louie, you, Max Green, Cesar Rivera, all these people, they become your family. And, you know, I could call Mike tomorrow and go, I need to talk. And Mike would go, let me clear my schedule. And that's what that's about. It's about that community that we build. And it's about serving our clients.
Virginia, I'm going to add one more thing to that, Virginia. We learned never to put a command post next to a burning building.
Yes, we did. We did.
And, you know, Virginia, I love what you just said, you know, and I see our friends from the fire department, you know, they talk to each other as brothers, right? So we have this community that is their support. So thank you, Virginia, for that. Louis, let me ask you a question along those lines and you know, taking care of ourselves and each other. What would you say to a responder that is struggling with a response that they went on?
Again, I think it really does come down to talking to somebody, talking to the people. I mean, feel free to call me, call any one of us on a phone call. I mean, I'm sure Dario, if they don't have your number, they should have your number, but any one of us, we can help you. We can talk to you. We've been there, done that, if you will. I think that's the biggest piece, and that's part of being part of the community. I may not know you, but I've known what you've been through in many respects. And that's, I think, the most important thing. We have love for each other. We've gone through a lot of things together. We have a lot of love and respect for each other, no matter what. So that's first and foremost. I think the other thing is you have to be smart about how you work, how your system is, and what are your good days and what are your bad days, what are your tolerances and not, and know when, you know, when something is not good for you, you walk away and you have somebody support you and back you up. We all know, you know, for us, one of the things that many of us is the days that we have, you know, we had deaths with children, you know, 1045s with children. That's a really, really bad day for all of us. You know, one of the things that we have to continuously do is just talk, just be able to talk. Some of the best lessons, to give VA a little bit of credit on a lot of different things, is some of the best lessons that I ever learned about this business was going outside to the front of the building and having and taking secondhand smoke from a cigarette smoke and the conversations that went on there. That was conversations that were, you know, we were able to just chat about whatever was going on and listen and just absorb those conversations and be able to learn. So I think there's a couple of things there, right? It's the mental health side of it that you have to take care of. It's a physical health side of it. I'll tell you personally, you know, that day, you know, in the diving and the running and the whole thing, I knew that I was in pain. I had a lot of pain for many, many years. And you know, years later, I found out that it was a bulging disc and it ruptured and, you know, and on and on and on, it splintered and a whole bunch of things that happened. It was all related to that. But you have to know and take care of yourself. And, you know, we all have that love to want to go and help everybody, but we sometimes forget about ourselves, and we have to take that moment to take care of ourselves first, or take care of ourselves as things are going, especially in the big events. Rest when you can.
Thank you, Louis. Sansan, can I ask you a little bit about what would you say your organization learned, Tzu Chi learned from this response?
Yeah. Actually, let me answer for her. Actually, we learned a lot from the whole operation, cooperating with Red Cross, and we learned how to step out our community to reach out, you know, and also how to collaborate with all the organizations. And yeah, and another thing is like, ironically, all the when disasters happen, people do need Red Cross and or Tzu Chi, to offer assistance. But we don't show our value and our functions only at when disaster happen. That would be sad. Yeah, and that's why we develop more programs. We will be able to offer more assistance or long-term programs when there was even no disasters. Yeah.
That is a great news to hear. Again, and I'm sure we'll be able to collaborate in some of those opportunities, as we have been doing with the home fire, the installation of the alarms that we've been working together. So,
Yes. More than that, we work with Red Cross when Hurricane Sandy happened, and there's a gas explosion in Holland, and fires a couple of times. The fires in the
many
city.
times. Yeah.
Yes, many times. Yeah, we work.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric. Go ahead. So
One of the learnings that we have with the Red Cross, I'm wearing another hat now. I was fortunate to be involved in the Red Cross as a volunteer, but also as a corporate funder. And one of the things that happened, and you mentioned the amount of water that was, the amount of product that was donated was staggering and wasteful. And so for corporations, I, at the time, worked for Colgate-Palmolive. Clearly our products was something that could be used in a disaster. But the learning was really helpful for both of us. How much is needed? Where is it needed? Don't take a plane and fill it full of useless product and then not be able to put people on it to actually distribute the product. So I think that was a really important learning that both sides had.
yeah, and Sally, actually, I do have a question for you here. So as somebody who's been with us for some time, and I remember when I joined the Greater New York region in the early 2000s, you were one of the cool kids that I wanted to hang out with. I was like, oh, I get to play with Sally. That was like exciting for me.
She's still Dario. She still
Yes, she is.
Oh, no. I'm talking about she was then and she is now. Yes, thank you. I always say the wrong thing sometimes. She definitely is. So what do you remember most about your involvement during this response versus others?
I think it was the worst of humanity, and it produced the best of humanity. The people were so extraordinary. In those first few days, it was a high beyond anything. Why anybody doesn't want to get into emergency response, I don't know. Every single person you came in contact with had the same aim. They wanted to help. They wanted to give back. They wanted to care. And that, to me, is the most powerful thing, and made me so incredibly proud to be a part of this organization. It had nothing to do with me, Sally Phipps. I represented the Red Cross, and it was an organization that people trusted, that they felt comfortable with. I had a policeman come up to me on the street when I was wearing my uniform and asked me if the airlines were running. And it was like, I wouldn't know that, but he just needed to have a contact, a touch point with somebody. And so we stopped and chatted. And I think that was incredibly powerful for me.
Thank you, Sally. Mike, I'm going to close this segment with you. And I know you have some slides. Do we have those ready that you want to talk a little bit about, Mike? I think that'll be a great moment to talk about that.
I turn around and find out what they're putting up here, but hold on. So there's a list of the people that you should all know and who have a communal life together now because of that exposure and that time. Next slide. That's not my slide. The photo right under, yeah. That is the only photo I have of that entire period. And that was taken by someone else who I can't even remember who it was. I was representing NYPD, the fire department, the American Red Cross. I had, I think, 14 IDs on me, and that was the one shot that I have. Next. These are great. These were comments made over the years. Every couple of years, we'd have, Pat and I would have a session at our home for our little group. And I'd get comments from, so Becky's comment, just read these, you know, there's always a place in my heart for this crew. We did some pretty incredible things. We chose fight over flight, and I am so glad we did. Sally, sitting next to me, said, I've been thinking about you all strongly, as I do every year. Hope you're all doing well. Can't wait to be with you together, person again. And then Louis, hey Louis, my dear friends, I hope this email finds you all well and thriving in your lives. Those days are so emblazoned in each of our memories and hearts, and will always keep us so close, no matter how many miles there are between us. And then Virginia's comment, I always think of September 10th as the day before, the before day, before our world changed, before we knew the full impact of terrorism, and before I knew how much each of you truly meant to me. That was such an intense time, and I had it not been for this amazing group, I would not have made it through. And I got to tell you, if it was not for this amazing group, I would not have made it through. And the last slide. That's the group. That's the group that showed up for one of the events. We look a little different than we did on that day. And the last slide. So some lessons learned. Don't ever put your command post next to a burning building. Don't rely on cell phone communication alone. Always have some first aid supplies with you. Build relationships with other agencies before the next disaster, and become familiar with a concept called special knowledge, which I spoke about before.
Thank you, Mike. Those are some great tips. Great tips. I'm going to ask Doran to come up and give us some closing presentation summary. I put this down.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. That was great. By the one-year anniversary, the American Red Cross had distributed $643 million to assist with the immediate response to the attacks, as well as to support the families of those who've been injured and deceased, and those who are left without work. That financial commitment grew to $1.1 billion by the 20th anniversary. Over 57,000 Red Cross workers provided 14 million meals and made over almost 400,000 mental health contacts to locate the families of those lost in the attacks. The Red Cross developed long-term recovery programs to assist those with ongoing mental health or family assistance needs. The Red Cross also added trainings to prepare both volunteers and citizens for future mass casualty and terrorist events. And this is kind of what Sally was saying. While it's important to remember the devastating losses of life and property, we should take a moment to recognize the countless examples of human compassion and giving. Thousands immediately signed up to volunteer, and hundreds of thousands signed up to give blood. Countless amounts of monetary and physical donations were made from people of all walks of life. The outpouring of national and global support was massive, but the work done by our dedicated Red Cross volunteers and staff here in Greater New York, as well as by their community partners during the early and continued phases of the operational period, were critical to the operation's success. It is with this in mind that we find it imperative to continue telling their stories. So thank you guys for being here. And then there's one more slide. And then there's one more video by Lieutenant Patrick Clancy. Throughout our presentation, he was, throughout our conversation, he was astonished by just the Red Cross camaraderie and all the different people that he met. So this is just a quick snippet of him speaking about
And
that.
I also remember when FEMA put their huge tent right off the west around Vesey Street, I think it was. So we would, given a specific location, then get relieved for an hour or two, and then go in to the tent and get something to eat. And I remember sitting with a Red Cross person. I remember this one fella. I said, "Oh, where are you from?" And he said, "Vermont." The Red Cross asked me to come down here, And I said, really, what do you do? And he was a nuclear engineer. And I said, oh, no kidding. And it was just interesting to talk to him and talk to the other people from around the United States, that I met there. And then when I go on these operations, I've made some pretty close friends. So it was just interesting to see these Red Cross people before I really got involved with Red Cross, the way they interacted with the emergency workers and of course the public. I see that now on my own side, how I respond to Red Cross events with the DART team.
Thank you, Doran. So, as I said before, we could have been here for 10 days, literally talking about the experiences, because this is a group of individuals that have been committed to this work, have been committed to the mission, have been committed to New York, and have been committed to humanity. So we could be here for days, but what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and open up some questions from those of you that are here. Maybe those of you, are we opening up in the mic on the virtual piece or just here, the chat? So we'll start with here. So let's open up for questions. Anybody has a question for this group, including Virginia and Louis? Yes, sir. Somebody's going to get a mic to you right now.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to, it's in the vein of learning from this. My nephew is a first responder. He worked with a team that had driven across the country from Oregon, and but they did not have respirators on. They didn't have masks on. And of the 14 responders that were working on this team, 6 of them have died since 9/11 with really strange cancers. The reason I'm asking this is, what you learn. We have lithium-ion batteries. Hazmat shows up. Should we be wearing masks?
So this will be more of a question of today, right?
No, I'm trying to say, what did we learn?
Got it.
Because the smoke was coming out of the incineration. There was possibly a crematorium blowing towards Brooklyn. That was not good smoke. That was very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say is lithium ion batteries, it has mats there. That's not a regular fire. But we go in there and do our damage assessment in the same fire.
Yeah.
As disaster action. I just want to, what are there things we can learn
Correct
from the past and use today?
I agree, and I think what we can do, because I appreciate that it's more than a question, right? I think it's also a thing for us to take action today, right? So I think John Coscone, if we can, I think that's something we need to look into locally and maybe even sharing with national organization. I don't know if anybody has something to add.
Well, the only thing I would add is that there were 55-gallon drums in the lower levels of the World Trade Center towers that created a lot of that fire and a lot of that heat. Very different than today. The lithium ion battery issue is rampant in New York City. I mean, as far as fires are concerned, and 10 seconds kind of they go. I wouldn't go into an area like that without a mask and a sufficient mask.
We did learn something from that. I mean, because like I just mentioned, that all volunteers enter ground zero without any protection. We will not even realize there's asbestos and other hazardous materials. And that was, think about that, it was very scary. Yeah. Hopefully nothing happened, but, we learned from that. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just wanted to share sort of a lesson learned that I saw that came out of 9/11, and I've seen it be improved tenfold as the speakers and the responses go on, is that the organizational support for mental health was very, very small after 9/11 because it was sort of a new thing to the organization because we never had anything that catastrophic. And I know that's a cliche term, but you know, then when we were doing deployments out of Greater New York for Katrina, we did like mental health screening and some significant, you know, questioning and training, explicit training before we sent people down south. And now we have, you know, when you people come back, you have somebody from mental health, you know, making those phone calls and following up. And I think that those are all the lessons learned that we, you know, that started after 9/11, and we continue to build and improve on those after every large or small disaster. So I mean, I do see a lot of sort of positive coming out of that.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing.
Hey, Dario.
Yes, go ahead, Virginia.
So Greater New York needs to be really proud about the mental health piece. In February of 1993, on February 26th, there was going to be a mental health meeting in the auditorium. And Paul Hoffman was leading it. And Dottie Breyer was there, and Diane Ryan, and all the people that we know from years. And Greater New York was really the trailblazer in mental health, and they really pushed it. And, you know, Paul was there on 9/11, Dottie was there on 9/11, Diane was there on Maggie Tapp. There was a number of people that were there, but, you know, I think Greater New York was a trailblazer when it comes to mental health and what the resources were.
Thank you, Virginia. Yep. We have one in the text. Desiree's going to read those texts, and I'll get back to you, Lex.
So we have a question online from Karen Emmerman.
Oh, my God.
Do you know her?
Okay, I'm sorry. That Karen is my daughter. She's in Seattle. My younger son, Daniel, is right over here, and TJ is over here, and he is one of the new, sorry, and he is one of the, this is an emotional evening for me. And TJ is a brand new Brooklyn dad for ARC. Okay. So
Hey, TJ.
By the way, ARC is the true Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. Right, Louis? Anyway.
Hey, man.
What's the question?
When you're in a situation that is changing constantly, including your knowledge of what is actually happening, how do you make decisions about whom to prioritize? It seems like 9/11 wasn't amenable to a fixed list of priorities since it was evolving so much.
Virginia.
You've been voluntold by Mike Emmerman, you know. I can't say no to Mike, so sorry.
So here's the thing I will say. As an organization, we have grown so much in the way we do things. You know, we have professionalized someone took my question away. Okay, I got it back. We have professionalized our work. And you're right, Karen, on that day, things changed rapidly. You make decisions about what we need to do based on our mission. And that morning, what we ended up doing is we moved people to Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bridge, the 59th Street Bridge, Grand Central Station, Penn's, all the major areas. And then if it didn't work, we'd move them again. And then if that didn't work, we'd move them again. And, you know, remember, email was pretty new then. We had Nextels. And there was not the level of communication that we have today. And so we did not have a fixed list of priorities. We knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to provide mental health care. We wanted to provide health services care. We wanted to provide, you know, first aid, respite to the workers down at Ground Zero. And before it was even called Ground Zero, it wasn't Ground Zero then. Pile, I think is what we called it. We wanted to have people in the EOCs. Mike spent, I don't know, days in the library at the police academy, which is where the first EOC was. We opened a family assistance center the first night at NYU. We moved it the next day to ACS, Administration for Children's Services. We moved it the next day to the Armory on Lexington Avenue. That lasted about 10 minutes because all the walls inside the Armory are painted black, and it wasn't big enough. And so we moved it then to Pier 94. So, you know, it's kind of like when you're trying something on and you just keep trying until you find the right fit. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the Red Cross is that we are willing to say, we tried it, it didn't really work. Let's figure out what we can do and how we can do it better. And we do that on the fly a lot. I will say though, our professionalism and how we respond, how we work, how we developed our teams. I mean, we have a national incident command team. We have, you know, regions that are handling their own mass fatalities with the shooting in Maine. There's so much going on in this organization right now that comes from those years of lessons. There's not a lot of people that are still around from the 90s and from 9/11. But we do continue to learn from that. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Virginia. Lex, somebody's bringing my tea.
I'm one of the first few ham operators who went into that area from Queens and from your old office on Amsterdam Avenue. And Mike, I appreciate your recommendation and your pointing out that you can't rely on cell phones alone. And also, it was very kind of you to express appreciation for the hams who set the antennas up and went to different places. As far as the ham operators go, I hope that this bit of advice gets considered and followed through in future plans. And this was very, very good input you gave. The other question pertaining to those persons who participated in this event, it's been brought to my attention that the records that were kept from the first or second day were very, very difficult to deal with, and that I'm wondering if there's still volunteers who may have had problems in getting their service confirmed. Is there a group that's looking into this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there is. There's a group at national headquarters, actually retired Becky McCory is part of that group. Certifying people who were at ground zero so that, you know, we make sure that people are taken care of. So yes, we are doing that. Records, you know, we did several transitions of systems, but there's a core group of us, Becky, me, Charles Blake, that worked in the Pentagon or in DC or in New York City. And, you know, we have been able to certify that people were there.
Well, that's good, as there are one or two ham operators who may not be aware of this, and I want to encourage them to follow through with this. In fact, I'll talk to you offline because I made a request and they couldn't find any of my paperwork, and I want to continue. So
yeah, Lex, so yeah, no, thank you, Lex. And just so everybody's knowledge, so locally you will reach out to volunteer services for that process. And Lex, in your case, let's connect with Rose, who's right in front of you, so we can support you through that process. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else virtually? Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody here. And I know we got over, but I just felt that it's so important to go through this stuff. So my apologies. I think it's so important.
Hi, I do have a question about communication from the generation that's absolutely crippled by cell phones. So when you said that your cell phone network went out, you don't know what you did. So how did you go and communicate effectively to make things happen after that? What can that happen in the future? What, if and when it does happen, how can you ensure that you have something ready for effective communication?
I stole a sat phone from an FBI agent. I literally did that.
Procured.
There was a moment where I knew that Pat did not know if I was dead or alive. And there was a group of FBI agents. I went up, I identified myself and I said, I need your sat phone. He said, you can't have it. I said, I need it. I need it now. He gave it to me. I don't know why.
So from my perspective, the two-way pagers actually worked for a little bit of time. We had them and they did work in between the Nextel, when the Nextel dropped, the cell phone dropped, we still had the pagers that were able to communicate a little bit. And then when we finally, I think when we finally got in the car, we were able to communicate with the car radio that we had to the base. But that's what we function with.
I think the other thing that I would say to that is we are so dependent on our devices. I can't tell you, to the ham radio operator that was just talking, I can't tell you how many times we've talked about when we have these major hurricanes that we need to make sure that there's a ham radio operator. Because on that day, that was the only way we could communicate with the shelters and with the different areas. And so, you know, our communication world is awesome. The challenge is when it's not there, we don't know what to do.
Thank you very much.
I think the question on the table is, going forward, do we have a point-to-point system for when our cell phones go down? What is our plan for the future? We did learn that we couldn't do it without ham operators, and we have very limited ham operators. So what is our future plan for point-to-point since next however we do?
It continues to be the ham operators. Actually, today we had a meeting to discuss that, the re-engagement of the ham radio team here at Greater New York. We've actually have remodeled this building right before COVID, and some changes were made. We've actually back in the DSC, disaster service technology, is actually currently, as of right now, literally this week and last week, they've been actually engaging the radio room, but we actually will then use that as headquarters. In Hurricane Ida, we actually did have that room operational with limited resources, but now the idea is to have it fully functioning back to the way we had it pre-COVID. That continues to be our primary plan.
We do have a comment in our Q&A. I just want to read Dario, who shared that he was one of the hams on 9/11, and he is glad someone mentioned amateur radio.
Nice to see you, Jose. Anybody else? All right, so again, this was an amazing night for me. Number one, because of what we're talking about, as somebody mentioned before, my apologies, can't remember who I said, you know, I believe it was you, Sally, or Virginia. You know, this was a tough, bad moment that brought the best in people. I think as a society, as a humanity, people stepped up and you know, I gotta say, you were those individuals that stepped up. You were those individuals that were there for New Yorkers, that were there for humanity. And I want to thank you for that, along with the firefighters, the DART teams, and those in the emergency management field. And those of you in the room or on the virtual piece that actually participated in this event. I want to thank you, but I also want to thank those of you that are doing it today. We have to continue to work toward being ready and being prepared for something, whatever it is. We had multiple disasters since 9/11, both natural and man-made. So we will continue to support that. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank you, the panelists. I want to thank you for being my friends, for being people that I trust, that I love, that I know and I respect. So thank you very much for everything, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, VA. Thank you, Louis. Nice to see you. Yes.
Same.
Go ahead, Wiki.
I do want to, I want a picture because I always do, but I want to give a really big shout out to Wiki and to Doran and to Chi and to Trevor for working to put all of this together and working through all of our audiovisual challenges. So thank you all so much for participating again tonight. And thank you again to our panelists. So good night, everybody. And